To all who are new here, my name is Dr. Michelle Henney, and I'd like to welcome you to Releve Sports Medicine's Virtual Journal Club. For additional webinar education opportunities, you can visit our website and register directly for the webinar, or sign up for the email list to be notified of upcoming webinars. We are continuing to update our schedule, so check back often. This video will be available for review after this journal club. The information contained in the video content represents the views and opinions of the presenters and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Releve Sports Medicine. The mere appearance of video content on the website does not constitute an endorsement by RSM or its affiliates of such video content. The video content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The video content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health care provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have read or seen on the site. RSM hereby disclaims any and all liability to any party for any direct, indirect, implied, punitive, special, incidental, or other consequential damages arising directly or indirectly from any use of the video content, which is provided as is and without warranties. We are looking for an athletic trainer to join our team. This is a full-time clinic-based position working in a sports medicine clinic. BMO certification is preferred. Please feel free to pass our information along if you know of a qualified candidate. More information regarding applying can be found on our website. For all athletic trainers who are intending to get live CEUs from the BOC, you will receive an email 1 hour after the webinar concludes, which includes a link to the combined quiz evaluation and assessment. You will have up to 72 hours to complete the quiz and the evaluation. This email will come from customercare@gotowebinar.com. Please ensure that this is done to receive your statement of credit. If you don't receive the follow-up email or you have any other concerns, then contact us via our email at journalclub@relevesportsmedicine.com. Once the statement of credit is available for download from our website, you will receive an email notification. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit the question and we will review questions at the conclusion of the presentation. And the recording will be available for review from our website tomorrow. Dale Nitzel is an athletic trainer who has 21 years of experience as a certified athletic trainer working with professional, high school, community college sports, and in the military. For the last 3 years, he has been working with the EOD group in Coronado, California. For many years leading up to that, he was working with the athletic trainer SMART Clinic at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California. He obtained his bachelor's degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in athletic training at San Diego State University and his master's of science degree in exercise science and health promotion with an emphasis in health promotion and injury prevention at California University of Pennsylvania. He will be speaking today about the roles of athletic trainers within the military setting. And I'll have you take it away.
Thank you for that introduction. So today we're going to talk about certified athletic trainers in the military setting. First, I have to say that I have no relevant financial relationship to disclose. I will not discuss any products in my presentation. So what is military medicine? It was defined as battlefield medicine back when World War I, World War II, all the conflicts. If you are old enough to remember MASH, that's what kind of military battlefield medicine was and is. A little bit different today, where now we have athletic trainers here in the United States and abroad in different countries working with different groups of the military. You can work with Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine Corps. Coast Guard is getting ready to start rolling out positions here later, probably around September, I think is when that contract's supposed to be awarded. So depending on where the ATC works, they can be teamed with physical therapists, physician assistants, sports medicine doctors, independent duty corpsmen or IDCs, corpsmen, and certified strength and conditioning specialists. Where the ATC works all kind of depends on who you're working with and where you're working at. So with me, when I was up at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, I was in a sports medicine clinic, which we were attached to Naval Hospital, Camp Pendleton. And there I worked with sports medicine PAs, sports medicine fellows, sports medicine doctors, some IDC, and some corpsmen. I also had friends that were embedded with the units up with the Marine Corps. That started about 2016, 2017, when they started embedding ATCs within the Marine Corps units or with the commands. The ATC can also work with a strength coach and a physical therapy, especially if you're in a specialty unit. You will get, sorry about that, went a little too fast. You will get with, if you're with special ops or stuff like that, you are there with the strength coach, you're there with the physical therapist, and you're there with some IDCs. Your roles are in military medicine is you're there to evaluate acute, subacute, and chronic injuries, and then you rehab those injuries, whether the acute, subacute, chronic. You discuss patient plan of care with the sports medicine PAs, the doctors, the command surgeon for the duty status, and we'll go over that later, which is full duty, light duty, limited duty. You also can go to the IDCs. You, there are some typos in here, sorry about that. You monitor command. If you're embedded in a command or you're embedded within a battalion, you are going to monitor the command physical training or the command PT and give feedback to the command. I know a lot of ATCs come in thinking, oh, we're going to change how everything works. Unfortunately, they've been doing it for so long. They will take your advice, but they can kind of still do it. Because I know Marine Corps loves to run in what we call boots and utes. It's which they're running in full uniform and their combat boots. And we've tried many times to say, hey, you know, this is not the best thing. You're going to cause more injuries. Before you can even evaluate or rehab any of these, you have to get your privileges to be able to get onto the medical system. So that you have to do some training that we'll talk about here in a minute. But the responsibilities are you have to document your treatments and your evaluations of the injured military personnel. You then provide your rehab programs and monitor the programs of the injured personnel. You communicate not only with the injured military person and their physicians, but you also kind of do it with a command, making sure you are following all HIPAA regulations. You also have to go to the MDs, the PAs, the IDCs, because right now you are not allowed to order any imaging. That has to be done from the PT, the IEC, the physician, or the physician assistant. You discuss with the physician assistant, the physician, the IDC, or the battalion surgeon if the military personnel needs to put on light duty or limited duty. So light duty means that they have an injury that you need a little bit of time to rehab. So you would like to have them held out from command PT, have them held out from any other physical activity that's going to make their injury worse. If they get on limb due, this is where this injury is serious enough that they're going to need at least 3 months to be able to come back from that injury. And you're allowed 3 of those 3 terms of that limb due before they med board you out. And we talk about that in a little bit. And then to help them, you use proper modalities as needed to help with rehabbing the military personnel. The responsibilities continued is you have to complete all training as required by the command. So when I was up at Camp Pendleton, every year we had to do training. You had to do your HIPAA training. You had to do your OPSEC training that talks about what you can and cannot say. As far as it's more, a lot of this training is more for the military side, but they talk about, if you're working with a patient and you're out with your friends and somebody has to overhear you saying, oh, this person's going on deployment and they're going to country and they'll be there from this date to this date. And they don't like when you do that. You also have to do a counterterrorism. You have to do cyber awareness. The counterterrorism, just don't wear anything that's going to show that you work with the military outside of that military setting. A lot of times, as a contractor or as a civilian, you don't have too much that says that your clothing is usually just, either business casual. I was lucky enough at my last job, I was wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt into work every day. So it just kind of goes along from there. You got to complete your documentation within 48 hours. Otherwise, you get nasty grams from the hospital that says, hey, you saw this patient. How come you have not finished their note? So within the responsibilities and the roles, as I said, you have to become a privileged provider. But when I first started, and then in my last duty station 2, we had to have our notes co-signed. And then eventually we went away from the co-signing. But with my notes have to be co-signed by the PA, the physician, I would get a thing back if that physician did not sign, or that physician assistant did not sign their notes within the 48 hours. I'm the one that got a thing that said, hey, your note's still open, it needs to be closed. You also have to attend all meetings that occur within working hours. If they do not occur within working hours, you are not held to have to be at that meeting. You talk to somebody later about what was in that meeting if somebody was there. And usually that consists of everybody within the medical team. So it's going to be the ATs, the physical therapists, the PAs, the physician assist, or the IDCs and the physicians. And both are civilian and military. I haven't seen any ATCs that are military because it's not an MOS. There are some ATCs that have a different job within the military, but they do not do their ATC role. I met 2 that were military reservists, but they were both ATC, so they're trying to look for a job kind of on both sides, but they do not get paid from the military as being an ATC. So your scope of practice, it depends on the setting you're working in. If you are working at a command where your provisioning provider above you says, yes, you can do XYZ, then you do XYZ. A lot of them will say no, but it also depends. So with me being at the Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, they told you what you could and could not do as a ATC. When I was down with the EOD command, they said, okay, you can do this, but you're limited on this. But you make sure you know your scope of practice before. Because if you don't know your scope of practice and you do something that hurts that military personnel, it's not only you that gets in trouble, it's whoever is licensed in your working group, which is usually the doctor. And sometimes the PTs can get in trouble with it too if you don't know what your scope of practice is. In your scope of practice, all the physicians who are above you will know what your scope of practice is, or you can go to the hospital and ask them, hey, what is my role? What is my scope of practice as an ATC? Some are not defined very well. If you're out in at a battalion, they're going to be a little different. I knew an ATC who was dry needling, but she was working with a special command, and the physician was okay with her doing that. where one, I haven't taken the class on dry needling, but I could not do dry needling in my scope of practice where I was working. You are able to use modalities of IASTM, which is instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization, graft and cupping, gua sha. You can use soft tissue mobilization, ART, massage. You can, some settings offer the ATC to do spinal adjustments, allow you to refer to other specialties, allow you to order imaging and dry needling, but they have to have your physician's approval. So my last few years at Camp Pendleton, they opened it up to where I could do referrals and I could order imaging, but I had to make sure it was okay with the physician, and the physician had to sign off on my note. And then evaluation and treatment with proper note taking. It's very important to do the proper note taking, because this what I've learned and what I dealt with is you can have a patient, either I worked with Marine, Navy, Army, Air Force when I was up at Camp Pendleton. And these guys PCS, or they get a different duty station, or they get out. Well, every note or every treatment that you've done on them is in their medical record. And now they're all going to the same type of medical reporting devices as far as where you do your notes at. So it will follow them around as long as they're in the military. Even if they get out, the VA has access to their notes. So make sure you're taking proper notes, make sure you're putting everything in there, because not only it helps them with their disability, but it also helps on the handoff to their next duty station, that the PTs, if they don't have any ATCs, they'll see the physical therapist, can monitor their notes and see what they're doing. Injuries. So when I first got into the military setting, I thought I was going to see a lot of different injuries. Unfortunately, it's the same injuries that you see when you're working as an ATC in a traditional setting. Sometimes you see it if you're working in a clinic, and even some non-traditional settings, it's all the same injuries. One thing I've noticed too, it's a lot more chronic injuries than any acute. My first few years at Pendleton, we weren't doing an acute clinic yet, so I was seeing a lot of chronic injuries, subacute, acute on chronic. Just because of it's due to the military personal training cycle, and then the time they get to the medical facility. A lot of these times, these commands, they look down at you if you go to medical, and then some commands are very happy for you to go to medical. So a lot of times, depending on where these guys are in their training cycles, they don't have time to go to medical. So the injury just keeps going, or they're trying to make it to where they can go onto a deployment, and they want that deployment because they want to be able to go get more money. Because when you're deployed, you get a little bit more money than when you're stationed, and they want to go on that deployment, so they will hold off seeing anybody medical because they don't want to get pulled off of that deployment. The most common injury I saw, no matter if I was with the Marine Corps or with EOD, was low back injuries. And a lot of times you're going to see that more in the Army and the Marine Corps, because they will actually, like I talked about before, they will do physical training in full uniform. And then they do a lot of what we call rucks or humps, where they will put a 50-pound to 100-pound, sometimes 125-pound pack on their back and go walk or march 10 miles. You also see shin splints, plantar fasciitis, ankle sprains, peroneal tendonitis due to the running in combat boots. And a lot of times, not only will you see that because they're running combat boots, but a lot of times they are what we call runners, which are your tennis shoes. They do get to switch those out sometimes, but you will notice that a lot of these guys have flat feet, Flat feet used to be a no-go for even getting to the military, but now they're letting them in. And if you've ever seen a pair of combat boots and put your foot in a pair of combat boots or just looked at them, they are very flat. So these guys don't get a lot of arch support. So we start having arch supports to try to combat that. You will see torn ACLs, PCLs, meniscus. I've had torn patellar tendons, dislocated patellas, and you get that from the command PT. Also, these guys like to jump off the vehicles instead of climbing out of them correctly. They decide, oh, we got to get off this 7-ton truck as fast as possible. So they jump, land incorrectly, and there goes their ankle, their knee, anything like that. Dislocated shoulders, AC sprains, torn UCLs, wrist and hand injuries from combat training, and parachute landings. So a lot of times, the Marine Corps has what they call MCMAP. It's their Marine Corps hand-to-hand they will have it to where they either be put in arm bars or getting hip throws, stuff like that. They're getting their elbows stretched out. They're landing on their shoulders. Their wrists get bent in a certain way. I've seen nerve palsy from the hikes with the loaded rucks or their loaded backpacks on their hips or on their back. Sorry, but I've also seen hips. So nerve palsy, they just pull on those nerves and cause it. I've had concussions from blasts, from combat training, from falling, and military accidents, vehicle accidents, where they will get thrown out of their vehicle. They even, like Marine Corps, if they have to go out in a vehicle, they have to be in full kit, which is they have to be in Kevlar and their flak. So it's to try to stop from them when they hit a bump, that they hit their heads. But I've had, and we started doing concussion testing my last few years at Pendleton, and then I did not have to do it at EOD, luckily. You will see sometimes some burn victims and amputees, but usually those go to the PTs or the OTs. Sometimes you see them if you're at the battalion level, at the command level. Sometimes you're the first person they see, so they will come to you, and then they'll go to ER, go to OT, go to PT from there. I've had a lot of injuries will happen away from the military while the person was on leave or was driving home from work and got into a motorcycle accident, got into a car accident. The injuries also depend on what setting you're working in. Like I said, sometimes if you're in the battalion level, you're going to see different injuries than you will if you're working in a clinic away from the battalion, away from the command, because those people usually have to go to the command first and then go off to the clinic from there. How the injuries are managed, it depends again on the setting that you're working in. You could be the first person to see them and decide what to need to do next, as far as like referring to the IDC, refer to the physician, the PAs for further examining. If you're in a clinic, then the PAs, IDC, or the physician sometimes will refer them to you. A lot of times I was lucky enough when I was at Pendleton, when we had the acute clinic, they'd come in and I was able to say, hey, go to the PA, go to the doctor and say, I got this guy, I think he, tore his ACL, can we get him an X-ray, possible MRI? You will learn that not everybody gets an MRI right away. You have to go through what I call the proper channels. A lot of it, first thing, is just like in the civilian setting. If you go to the ER, they're going to take an X-ray first, and then let everybody else decide where to go from there on if you need the MRI or not. Military personnel only have a certain number of days that they can be off duty before they might be processed due to medical. So we talked about if you're light duty or limited duty. So light duty is usually 1 to 2 weeks, depending on what the injury is and if you're able to do it. If you don't think you can do that, and a lot of people don't want to be put on LIMDU. Like that LIMDU, you're able to have 3 sessions of LIMDU before you are what we call possibly med boarded out. And that's just what that does is, say you had an ACL reconstruction, you're not coming back from it, you re-tore your ACL again, and you don't want to have another surgery, and you know you cannot perform your duties. What the med board comes down to, and what limited duty comes down to, is that this military person can still perform with the job at hand of what the military needed them to do. And then the med board determines the disability and processing out of the military because they are no longer able to do their jobs. Like I said, a lot of this all depends on where you work, who you're working for. I could have the opportunity to, like I said, there are ATCs abroad. So when I was waiting for all my paperwork and everything to go through with EOD, I was reached out to go work with the Air Force in Aviano, Italy. I was reached out to go work for the Air Force in Edinburgh, England. So you just got to, hopefully this helped tell you what your roles and responsibilities are. Due to the nature of everything, sorry. But like I said, the other thing is, and I know I don't have it in a slide, is right now the Army has an H2F program. And within that program is a physician, a psychiatrist, a head athletic trainer, regular athletic trainers, a lead strength coach, strength coaches under them. They so what we're starting to learn in the military setting is mental health is playing a big role. And I've learned when I was with up at Camp Pendleton, and a little bit when I was down at EOD, is the command you're with can what I call make or break you. If the command's not giving you time to go to your medical appointments, if the command's not paying attention to your light duty or your LIMDU, the command doesn't quite get in trouble. It's more on you or on the military personnel. You don't get in trouble, but more on that military personnel where they have to sit there and think, do I want to stay in or do I want to get out? And a lot of times they want to get out, so they do not follow the med board process of trying to get out and get that disability. They're just done and they want to get out. And then you have other commands that the military personnel love to be in because they let them go to their medical appointments, they let them go to their psych appointments, they let them go to any of their appointments where they love that command and they don't ever want, when it's time to PCS or PCA, they never want to leave because they would rather stay within that command. it's a lot of the settings that you're going to be in. But the big thing is, if we go back to, come on. So go back into the injuries. Just go into a little bit more of what I mean by amputees. I've seen, when I was up at Pendleton, I saw about 4 amputees. Some happened while they were in country. And if I say in country, I'm talking about they were deployed and they either an IED or they got shot. I just had one of the guys I worked with when I talked about a lot of these injuries happen when they're on leave or they are doing a performance with somebody else. I had an AOD guy who was parachuting, missed his landing zone, and ended up breaking his femur, breaking his pelvis, and hurting his knee. Now, a lot of things that these guys have to deal with, if it's that, or I had working with EOD, they had a lot of international EOD guys coming to help. So we had some guys from Australia. This officer from Australia was up at a ski resort and a snowplow was coming and his daughters were on the way. So he went and jumped on his daughters and he ended up losing one leg from the hip down and the other leg from the knee down. So they, Australia said, okay, well, we don't think you're going to get the therapy you need there in the US, which he would have. But since he kind of couldn't perform his duty as what he was assigned to do here, Australia pulled him back. We had a guy from France. We had another guy from Italy. The places where you work, it also depends on the clearance you need. So a lot of times with, and what I've found out is Navy and Marine, mainly Navy because Marine don't have their own medical facilities, but Navy is the only one that requires anybody that works on any patient to have a clearance. And when I mean clearance, it's you have to go through a background check. You have to fill out what we call an FS86, which is about 10 pages. It could be more if you have more foreign nationals that you need to report. But you have 3 clearances. You have a general clearance, which I had when I was up at Pendleton. You have a secret clearance, and then you have a top secret clearance. Each clearance, so a general clearance is good for 15 years. A secret clearance is good for 10 years, and a top secret clearance is good for 5 years, with renewing every 15, every 10, or every 5. So if you have any kind of shady things in your background or this or that, the hardest clearance to get is the top secret clearance because they will go around and ask your neighbors, friends, they look into your bank accounts and everything to see if you can get that top secret clearance. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you want to go work with the military. I'm not saying that they're going to, not do it. And I've had people get a interim clearance before their clearance completely goes through. Another thing I saw, going back injuries, sorry, I'm jumping around, but going back into injuries, I had a guy who was leading command PT with the Marine Corps, and all of a sudden he said he was just leading jumping jacks, felt a pop and hit the ground. So with that, he came in and was actually able to see me, and he had a torn Achilles. And so I've learned now that there's different ways that you take care of an Achilles rupture. Is we put that guy in a walking boot, let it scar down with no surgery. Had another patient who tore his Achilles tendon, was put in a walking boot, scarred it down without playing racquetball for command PT, and tore it again. So you will see some very interesting injuries. I had, and as far as rehab goes, you will rehab a variety of injuries. A lot of times, depending on where you're at, you don't get to do post-op. You can do pre-op rehab. Post-op rehab, a lot of the settings will have them go to the PT instead of you. I've done PRP rehab. I've done prolotherapy rehab, hydrodissection rehab. So again, just make sure you know your scope of practice. Talk to your PTs, talk to your doctors, make sure you're all on the same page, because it's going to make things go a lot smoother. I've been in situations where the PTs don't get along with the ATs, and that just kind of puts a hindrance on everything that you're trying to do. As far as the dislocated shoulders, usually I let the doctors put those back in. I can and I have reduced a dislocated shoulder. And what we do is, if we're in clinic, we get a pre and post relocation x-ray to make sure it was relocated all the way. We had one guy who relocated, sent him to x-ray, and he dislocated on the way back to x-ray, so we had to relocate him again. Another big thing you're going to see military as an ATC is they do a lot of CSI injections. They have now gone to ultrasound guided CSI injections or corticosteroid injections. And so they'll try that. These guys also get sent to what we call pain management. And what pain management does is, for your low backs, you get a lot of herniated discs, spondylolisthesis, and sorry, I have a list, so I don't like to say a lot of the S words, but you get spotty and spondo. And what a lot of times the pain management does is they will do they'll burn off those nerves to make it so the pain goes away. So a lot of times you'll get guys that you're rehabbing from after having neuroplasia done. I just want to go over a little bit more on some of these injuries. The good thing about if you work in a battalion, if you work in a command, that you're the first person that gets to see these guys, you do your evaluation, and then you can start rehabbing them right away. You know, if you know it's a torn ACL, you don't need the MRI to tell you, yeah, it's a torn ACL. You can go ahead and rehab them, get them ready, because you know they're going to have to do the x-ray. You know, they want to get that swelling down before you even are able to get the MRI. If you are doing on your rehab, like I said, you can do ART, you can do grass, and you can do cupping. Go back to what the NATA says, and me being out here in San Diego or me being out here in California, we're not licensed within the state. So you also got to pay attention to your state licensures, or what the NATA says. NATA basically said that you can perform as long a modality as long as you are competent in that modality and you will not harm to your patient. But make sure you know what your state licensure says. It's a slippery slope by working on a military base compared to being out in the civilian world. A lot of times you still need to follow your state licensure, because the state will come after you if you don't have your licensure. I've been licensed in the state of Arizona and the state of Montana when I was working in pro baseball. Somehow I slipped out of not having to be licensed when I was down in the state of Florida. But make sure you know your state licensures. Make sure you know, not only do you know what your state licensure says you can and cannot do as an athletic trainer, when you step on a government entity, sometimes the government will trump whatever your licensure will say you can do and can make your scope smaller. That's why I said make sure you know what your scope of practice is, because you do not want to get out of your scope of practice, because if you, like I said, if you do something wrong or you hurt this person because you did something that wasn't in your scope of practice, and they decide, because they have finally opened it up to where military can sue their providers now. So if you hurt them to where they cannot function anymore and they sue you, like I said, it's not only on you, but it's on the doctor that you were licensed, that was over you, whose license you were using. So it's very important that knowing the scope of practice and knowing what your state licensure says and what the government says your scope of practice is, that's a very important thing to know, because you do not want to end up losing your job or anything like that because you did not do that. And the basic modalities, your ice, your stem, you're not going to hurt anybody with that, but just be sure that, if it's an outdated machine that you're not used to, make sure you kind of know how to use that machine. I'm not trying to, no, we're all athletic trainers, we're all physical therapists, we know the modalities and how to use them. But some, I've been around some machines that you still need to use a, darn it, I'm trying to think right now. Use the versus pad where you have to wet it and then put it on the thing before you do like ultrasound or ultrasound e-stim combo. The big thing is the note taking, the evaluating the injuries. If you have, another thing you have to watch out for is if you have a Marine who's very upset, or you get Marines, or even sailors, soldiers, airmen, a lot of them, if they're not happy in their command, you will find that out real quick, because they will come into you and they will talk to you and they will tell you everything about what's going on and that they don't want to be there no more and they went out. I actually had a coworker who, this Marine wanted out. She just couldn't handle the command anymore. She just didn't want to be a Marine anymore. He helped her get out by going to the physician who went to the command and said, hey, this is going on. You also are you're not a true mental health provider, but you are like their first person they see sometimes for military medicine. They will vent to you. They will come to you and say, why am I not, that's why you have those psychology classes in school. But, when somebody's injured and they're not getting better and they are learning that they're going to get kicked out, be compassionate with them. Um, I've been around some of my coworkers or some other people who didn't care. They're like, you know what, you're getting out. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't want to see you. Get away from me. And you could just see the look and stuff on their face of why, I thought we were going to get better. I wanted to be a life. I wanted to do my 20 years, wanted to get out after 20. So a lot of it is very hard on these Marines or any military personnel member who is about to get med boarded out. That's not something they want. I had a female Marine. She was seeing one of my coworkers, and my coworker did an eval on her. Then he left to go to nursing school. So I was like, all right, well, he knows what he was talking about. Let me just read it. And this person wasn't getting any better. And I'm like, what's going on? It was, oh, it's just an MCL sprain. Well, not only did she have an MCL sprain, she had a MPFL tear. So we ended up doing PRP on it. Well, I didn't do it. The doctor did PRP on her MPFL, and we started rehabbing her back from that. Well, the pain in her knee was masking. She had bilateral labral tears in her hips. So we rehabbed her knee, got her knee better, but then she just couldn't do any more because of the pain started in her hips. So she ended up getting med boarded out. That wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to be a 20-year Marine. Let me do this as a career and go from there. So she was a little upset. I tried to explain to her and everything, and she was not upset with me. She was just upset at the process of how things kind of went along. Because we had it to where she was almost back to return to full duty. And then the hip thing. So be careful if you do work in the military, make sure you are rehabbing them to return to their job. So it's very important to know what their job is, what their job entails. I'm not saying go, So I've been out and I've watched the Marine Corps CFT, which is one of their fitness tests they have to do in the winter months. And it's where they sprint an 880 and what we call boots and utes. Their uniform and their boots. They sprint an 880, get a little bit of a break, and then they have to go do as many ammo cans as they can, and within 2 minutes, get a little break, and then they do what we call a movement under fire, which is they run down, do some, or they start with a low crawl to a high crawl to low crawl to obstacle, just moving in and out of cones, to going down, picking up their buddy, dragging them for 10 yards, and then throwing them up on do a fireman carry and rush back 30 yards. Then they put their buddy down, grab some ammo cans, go back down, zigzag, grab a fake grenade, throw it into a ring. They have to do 10 push-ups, grab the ammo can, sprint back. So by watching that, I could help figure out what we needed to do to make it so they could pass that, because that's one thing they need to do to get back to their job. Another thing they do is what we call the PFT, which is they run this one. They're in regular PT gear, so shorts, t-shirt, and runners. Run 3 miles. Have to do a 3-minute plank, push-ups, pull-ups, push-ups or pull-ups. So you want to know those physical tests. Navy does what they call a PRT, which is a 1.5 mile run, has as many push-ups as they can do in 2 minutes, and then a 3-minute plank. The military has also decided that, if you can't run, we'll let you do other things. So you can bike where you have to do a certain number of RPMs. You can do an elliptical. You can row. So treat and train your patients if you work in the military or if you look and plan on working in the military, know what their job is, know what they have to go through day in and day out. Go watch some of the training that they have to do, because you can sit there and try to rehab. It's just like rehabbing your division, your college or your high school athlete. You can't just throw them right back out on the field saying, okay, go ahead and go and see what happens. I always told my high school patients, I've told my pro players, I've told my military personnel, look, if you're not mentally ready, I can't put you back out there, because not only is it a detriment to you, detriment to me, it's a detriment to everybody else involved. So make sure you help mentally and physically. And if you can't do it, don't be afraid to tell them it's okay to go to mental health and talk to somebody down there, because their careers are depending on this. So your roles and your responsibilities of an ATC in the military, it's wide, but it's narrow. So know where you want to be at in that. And like I said, a lot of it does depend on where you get put. Are you working with the battalion level? Are you working at command level? Are you working within the hospital? And there's times that I went out and not only did I see the stuff, but don't be afraid to talk to your flight surgeons, your doctors, see what they expect, see how they deal with the patients, because ultimately that's who you're going to have to send the guys to. So make sure you have a good rapport with them so they know who you are and you know who they are. Your IDCs, your PAs, your sports medicine docs, your senior medical officer, make sure that they know how you are and how you do things and what your knowledge is, because if you don't want them to second guess what you're sending them.
Dale, there are a couple of questions here, if it's okay.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, sure. The first question comes from Naomi, and she says, thank you for your presentation. I am currently a contract AT working with the Army's H-2F program at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My question is, are you employed as a contractor through a private contract company, or do you have a GS position directly with the government?
Unfortunately, I've been a contractor for all the times I've been working. Contracting is mainly it's a private contract company. There are many different contract companies out there. And the way it goes is the military says, okay, we want to, so like with the Coast Guard jobs coming up, the military is like, okay, we want this many people, and these are the positions we have, and then these contract companies bid on it. And then when they bid on it, they usually go with one of the bids, and then hopefully that, as a contractor, was always hoping to go to a GS position, but unfortunately, I've only been a contractor with a personal contract company. So that answers Naomi's question.
And then another question comes from Cassandra. She asks, how many patients do you see on a regular day?
Okay, so that varies. So before COVID hit, I'm one that working at the junior college, it was me and one other athletic trainer in 16 sports and all the athletes, and me working in baseball where I had 135 athletes sometimes, or baseball players. I always want to keep myself busy. So when I first started at Pendleton from 2013 to 2018, I was seeing about 24 patients a day. And then it went down to 20 patients a day. And then when COVID hit, I was lucky to see 6 patients a day. But so it varies. A lot of the commands, if you're working, depending on where you're working at, a lot of these commands kind of say how many patients you need to see a day. So it's going to vary. It's going to vary on that. If you're a lot of times if you're in a battalion or a command, like when I was down at EOD, there is times I'd only work on the strength conditioning side and see no rehab patients at all.
And then there were several attendees who were not able to see the slides, and they tried a few different things. Would it be all right with you if we send out the PowerPoint slides to the attendees?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Okay. Sarah asks, what EMR does the military use, and is it the same for all branches? Are you able to see records from all base if a military personnel moves around for duty? Oh, from all bases.
Okay. So right now they're not all on the same EMR system. When I first started at Pendleton, we were on Alta, and then it went to Genesis, which was both were nightmarish. But there is a link on both of those that is called Joint Legacy Viewer. And so if you're not on, so if you're working at one base and they have a different EMR than what the military personnel came from, there's a thing called Joint Legacy Viewer that you should be able to get on, and that will show all their medical notes from wherever they were seen. I had guys who went out on recruiting duty, and I was able to see some of their civilian notes. It's very tricky. The military is trying to all be on one EMR system. They just haven't got out there yet. And these guys still do have their paper charts that they will carry around with them too. So if you have any questions, you can always ask them to bring in their paper chart if they have PCS from a different duty station that doesn't have the same EMR, or you can't see their notes from that EMR.
I'm waiting to see if there's any other last burning questions here.
No worries. I'm happy to answer anything.
And thank you very much for your time. I know this is kind of middle of the afternoon for you.
That's fine. I was going to do this outside, and then it's overcast out there, so I'm like, we'll be inside.
Okay. And I had noticed in your CV that it seems like even though the contracts were changing, you were just kind of jumping to whichever group seemed.
So yes. So if you have any ATs that are in the military setting that are on contract, so my first few years there, the contracts were every 2 years. So every 2 years you had to always think, all right, am I going to be getting a different contract company? Am I not going to get a different contract company? If you do get a different contract, and now the contracts are 5 years. I know for the Navy, they're every 5 years now. I don't know how Army does theirs yet. You being an incumbent, you always get first choice. So if you do get a new different contract company, they will come in and say, okay, we're taking over the contract. This is what we are going to pay you. And then at that time, you have the option of saying, you know what, I was making more money with the previous contract company. I decline, I'll go find another job. Luckily, I've been lucky enough that each contract company I went with, I was making more. And then, but even the last one I was with at Pendleton, I think I took a 30-cent cut in pay. But so if there are guys out there on contracts and they're like, well, I don't think this is going over to GS, what am I going to do? Know that you have first say when a new contract company takes over that contract, because they will go with the incumbents first, and then if anybody says no, then they open it up to the outside.
Very interesting. Well, thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. Certainly having the insight from your position has been requested multiple times by previous attendees. So we're always happy to reach out. I think it was Dr. Elliott Hugh who had connected us.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you took the time to put the presentation together and give that today. Thank you to everyone for attending. And please feel free to fill out any other specific requests if you have things that you would like to learn about in the future. All right, and have a great day, everyone.
You too.